Britain are some of the finest gardens anywhere in the world. For me, it's about getting in amongst the wonderful plants that flourish in this country and sharing the passion of the people who tend them. However, there is another way to enjoy a garden. And that's to get up above it. I love ballooning because you get to see the world below in a whole new light. From up here, you get a real sense of how the garden sits in the landscape, how the terrain and the climate has shaped it. And I want you to share that experience with me. I'm taken to the skies above the royal heart of Scotland, where ancient history seems to ooze out of every rugged peak and misty hollow. The country's dramatic landscape has been shaped and defined by glaciers and granite over millions of years. Today I'm in Aberdeenshire, the most easterly county of the Scottish mainland. The city of Aberdeen sits in the middle of the wind-lashed North Sea coast. The terrain varies from soft, gentle mountains to rugged, spectacular crags. And despite its easterly, biting winds, down there are some rather spectacular gardens. It is an amazingly beautiful country, isn't it? I'm visiting some gardens today which have a strong royal connection and which are magnificently colourful, even as we head into autumn. The first is recognised as an outstanding work of art, and there's plenty to do to keep it that way. Oh, I don't bet you're saying she'll split rather easily. This brute isn't. I reckon you picked that one on purpose. The second is thought to be one of Britain's highest gardens, where all my senses are overwhelmed. I think of mist and moisture and that weird smell. Absolutely super. And we discover the secrets of the mysterious monuments left behind by our ancient ancestors. Heading inland from Aberdeen, you reach beautiful Royal Deeside, where the royal family has been holidaying since Queen Victoria fell in love with it in 1842. And on a sunny slope overlooking the River Dee is Crathes Castle. Built in the 16th century and handed down through 14 generations of the ancient family of Burnet of Lees. They created one of the finest and most important gardens in Scotland. From up here you get a real sense of how the castle sits amongst its beautiful garden. Magnificent herbaceous borders, spectacular topiary, a fountain garden and some really beautiful trees and shrubs, and I just can't wait to get down there. 400 years under the loving care of one family has given this garden enormous historic significance. The 3.5 acres of walled garden next to the castle started life as a kitchen garden, designed to keep the castle household supplied with fruit and vegetables. But over the centuries, it's evolved into something much more flamboyant and artistic. 8 individual rooms on 2 levels each have a different character and are divided by ancient yew hedges, giving them structure amongst a glorious riot of colour. And that's largely thanks to Sir James Burnet and his wife, Lady Sybil, who were passionate about the estate. Their brilliant imagination and plantsmanship helped this garden burst into life at the beginning of the last century. Crathes, the sparkling jewel in the horticultural crown of Scotland. Sumptuous borders, beautiful trees and shrubs, and for me, a fantastic tribute to Scottish gardening history. Lady Sybil was an early disciple of renowned garden designer Gertrude Jekyll and was well known to her contemporaries for her gardening skills. She first planted the upper pool garden with an unlikely mix of flowers in red, yellows and bronzes and created a unique display. Sir James, who had a distinguished career in the army, was fascinated by trees and hedges and introduced rare and unusual species onto the estate. The garden today is recognised as an outstanding example, but gardens only stay that way with a lot of hard work. And I'm meeting Toby Loveday, the head gardener, who's at work in the upper pool garden. Hi, Toby.
Hi, Christine.
Nice to meet you.
How you doing?
What are you doing here?
We're doing daylilies. We do this at the end of the season. It helps their vigour, encourages them to flower next year. But also, as you can see, there's an awful lot of dead through it, so we're going to be taking a lot of that out as we go.
But would you like a hand?
Yes, please. Yeah, sure.
Right, and just the traditional up, out, and then
Absolutely.
try and split them?
Yep, yep.
It's satisfying work, but Toby's energy wasn't always directed to digging.
Well, originally I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a drummer in a band.
A drummer?
Yeah. But
There's a contrast.
But my mother very sensibly advised me that I needed something to fall back on. So I went to college for 3 years, and then I studied at the National Trust for Scotland's School for Gardening at Threave.
Now there's a nice place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was wonderful. So learnt a lot.
Whatever your training, every gardener has to learn how to make the best of the environment they've been given. And Toby, like Sir James and Lady Sybil before him, have adapted to Crathes. Oh, I don't bet you're saying she'll split rather easily. This brute isn't. I reckon you picked that one on purpose. Can I borrow your fork?
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. Brilliant.
That's sounding better. Yeah, there you are. Thanks very much.
Okay.
What are the challenges you face here at Crathes?
I think climate is probably our biggest challenge. Being in the northeast of Scotland, we can have some pretty severe temperatures in the winter, dipping down to about -15 at worst. But also we have very light, free draining soil.
You're telling me.
Yeah, I know. Very little clay in that. So in the summer months, when it doesn't rain, the garden reacts really fast to that, and we actually have to really irrigate quickly to get on top of it.
But you haven't got soggy feet in the winter, mate.
Absolutely not. No, never.
That is lovely.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And presumably that restricts the range of plants you can grow.
To a certain extent, yeah. Roses don't particularly like it. It's a very light soil for them. So we struggle with roses. They're a bit more of a challenge, absolutely. So herbaceous perennials we grow very, very well.
Oh, it smells all right as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I like that. One of the biggest challenges for a garden that's been established for a long time is how to refresh and invigorate it. And that's now Toby's job, as Sir James handed over the castle and the estate to the National Trust for Scotland in 1951, bequeathing a lifetime's work and some important horticultural species. This is a very established border, isn't it? But what sort of age period would this have been planted, and what's the history to this tree?
Well, this particular one is a magnolia, and this would date back to the time of Sir James and Lady Sybil Burnet in about the 1930s.
And how do you know that?
We actually have Sir James Burnet's original planting book.
Wow.
That basically details every single plant that they had in the garden at that time.
Blimey.
Mm-hmm.
So you've actually got a physical record of what has gone into this garden?
Yeah, at that time. It's very important.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how are you dealing with the fact that this garden is actually getting quite old?
Many of the specimens within this garden are of quite historical and horticultural significance, so we really need to look closely at how we preserve these specimens going forward for the future.
And do you have a specific type of propagation? I mean, this can be propagated in different ways.
Sure. We'll probably start with some cuttings and see what sort of success we get with
OK, well,
that.
let's have a collection of a bit of material. Taking cuttings is a cheap and an effective way of growing more plants, but make sure you use healthy parent plants and take cuttings at the right time of year.
So I think there's a bit more up there, so I think it's a case.
Got it?
Yeah, I think so.
Magnolias are distinctive trees or shrubs with large goblet or star-shaped flowers that burst into bloom in spring and summer. To produce the best growth and flowers, they need full sun and fertile, moist soil. But most of all, magnolias like to be sheltered, so are often grown against a sunny wall.
Is this a garden for different seasons, or has it got a specific season?
No, because of these rooms that we have, each one has a different character, and pretty much each time of year there's something different to see. The way it's evolved is the sort of garden you tend to wander and explore very randomly. I don't think there are two similar routes around the garden to follow, sort of thing, but that kind of adds to that sense of adventure that you have as you're exploring and discovering new rooms.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Now, I reckon there's a lot more material up there, but I think we're going to need a ladder.
I think so.
Let's go and get a ladder.
Sure.
Toby's following in the footsteps of a head gardener at Crathes who carried out Sir James and Lady Sybil's instructions when they were gardening almost 100 years ago. He was local legend Douglas Macdonald, who joined the staff in 1937. His son Doug was brought up in a cottage on the estate.
I was brought up in here and just had the run of the place, climbing trees and being devilment. I used to go fishing, doing a bit of poaching here and there. I was just one of the warriors of Crathes.
While young Doug was up to mischief, his dad lived and breathed the castle garden every waking moment. Each plant was in its place, and the borders were his pride and joy.
He really enjoyed himself here as well. The gardens there was his second home. That was all he could think of, was just gardening, gardening, gardening. The amount of people, thousands of people that he spoke to in a year was unreal. All over the world, people coming in about and congratulating them and the state of the garden and everything. And
Douglas advised people all over the world on garden design, made appearances on the BBC and was awarded the British Empire Medal for services to gardening. And young Doug often lent a helping hand. When he was 10 years old, he remembers mowing the croquet lawn as some very special visitors arrived.
that green was to be cut specifically dead straight. And my father came up the steps and he, whoa, stop, what's wrong? He says, the royal family. He says, are they? So just went down the came into the garden, and this was the Queen and Prince Philip, and a couple of the litlings. Prince Philip, he comes straight over to me. What are you doing? I said, I'm cutting the green to a certain height. I says, for the Sir James and Lady Bonnet playing croquet. Can I have a shot? I says, yeah, no problem. But I said, you have to keep it straight, mate. Oh, well, but by the time he was finished, it was like a snake. He come back, he says, I think I'll leave it for you, he says. I'm not very good. I says, no, you're nae that. Prince Philip wouldn't make a croquet green cutter. No way.
Although Doug was a dab hand with a mower, as he grew up his career took another path and he went to work in the oil industry. But his memories of childhood and his love of this very special garden have never left him.
So Doug, tell me what it was like to grow up on this estate.
Well, it was absolutely fantastic, really. You got the freedom of the garden, for a start.
Oh, and what about your time in the garden with your dad? You know, did he show you how to garden at all?
No, not really, because I wasn't actually interested. But once I was older, I appreciated it better.
Yeah.
because I used to come in here and meditate, relaxed, walk about myself, and you got all the different smells and the perfumes of the plants and everything, and you stopped and you listened and all you could hear was the birds.
Yeah.
And sometimes I used to think it was my own garden.
Yeah.
And I was so chuffed with that.
Right. Your dad would be very proud of that thought.
Yes, he would be now. And just a pity he wasn't still with us.
Yeah. But I get a terrific sense that you are in love with this garden.
Yeah, yes, yes.
And that's very special.
Because I used to come in and see him.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just saw his head
Yeah.
popping up and down between the shrubs and everything.
And what was he like as a man?
Very regimental.
Right.
He liked everything to be done to his standard. If it wasn't done with the gardeners, he'd come back and did it himself. If he got a chance, he would have taken his bed in here and he would have slept in the borders sometimes. This was his pride and joy.
There's no doubt that Douglas Sr. made his mark here at Crathes. And from up here, it's easy to see how the gardens and the castle rising up out of this beautiful landscape were meant to inspire awe. But long before Crathes was built, other ancient communities were making their mark on the landscape, with monuments on hilltops all over North East Scotland. Adam Welfare, from the Royal Commission on the Ancient Historical Monuments of Scotland, explains.
Here in Aberdeen, we're essentially in a glacial landscape, and those glaciers, as they melted, will have left an enormous amount of debris behind. And it is that debris that people, over the last 10,000 years, in a sense, have been gradually clearing away. And in this particular instance, stone has been cleared from the landscape and reconstituted, if you like, into a stone circle.
For me, stone circles like this one at Tom Naviri have an eerie, mystical quality that fits so well with the Scottish landscape. And there are more than 70 of them in this part of the country, all with the same intriguing feature. One huge stone lying on its side between two uprights.
They are actually designed to impress the visitor, first and foremost. You're meant to notice them in the landscape.
Archaeologists now believe they know the secret behind these particular stone circles.
The heart of these stone circles, there is usually the remains of a funeral pyre. Subsequently to that, they have started to build a very complex construction which is completed by the stone circle.
It seems the stone circle is all that remains of a monument marking a sacred site where a cremation had taken place. And it's now thought that the two upright stones symbolise a doorway into or out of the circle, which is closed by a recumbent stone, perhaps to keep the spirits of the dead within the circle?
So these are sealed spots, and it seems that the stone circle itself is kind of set of railings, if you like, into which human beings are not really meant to enter. That's what the people of the early Bronze Age believed in 2500, 2300 BC.
But the circle also had another deeply symbolic and important meaning for the society that went to so much trouble to construct them.
The essential characteristic of stone circles is, of course, their circularity. And we believe that it's symbolic of the cycle of life. What is the cycle of life? It is essentially that we're born, we grow older, and then we die. But it's a cycle. And the people who built these stone circles was quite aware that whatever might happen to the individual, life went on.
I love the idea that these monuments give us clues about how our ancestors used to live and what they believed.
The axis is essentially northeast-southwest on these stone circles, just the same as at Stonehenge. And that axis is closely related to the position of the sun at both the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And they saw in this a metaphor for life, that essentially the longest day and the shortest night is life at its most vital, when you're young and fully developed and, in our world, having children, etc., etc. But at the winter solstice, it's associated with the death of nature and the death of human beings. Essentially, what they're encoding in these stone circles is their understanding of life.
Our ancestors knew what they were doing when they created these awe-inspiring monuments in stark contrast with the lush landscape around them, and we're still doing the same thing today. Head northwest towards the Cairngorms from Tomnavira and you come to an estate that dominates its surroundings in just as magical and mysterious a way. It's called Tillypronie.
Its gardens are full of spectacular heather beds, magnificent herbaceous borders and trees and forests that melt into the landscape.
Tillypronie means top of the hill, and it was exposed to the very harshest weather conditions Scotland could throw at it until belts of trees were planted for shelter. Nestled into the foothills of the Grampian Mountains, Tillypronie has stunning views.
It sits at over 1,000 feet and as such is claimed to be one of the highest gardens in Scotland, having frost practically every month of the year. And now it's beginning to turn its autumnal glory.
It's definitely the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness here as I make my way along the edge of the lake with head gardener Kate Redpath. It's the kind of place that makes you feel a bit poetic.
Oh, this is quite atmospheric, isn't it? Hey, it's rather lovely, isn't it, with all this mist? It's terrific.
But Kate's got something more practical in mind.
Just watch your step on that.
Okay, thank you. God, so what are you doing down here?
As you can see, we've got rather a lot of skunk cabbages.
I see, I mean, and both species here?
Yes, both species. We've got the white one and the yellow one, Asian and American. The Asian one's not a problem, but the American one spreads everywhere. So we're just trying to reduce it a little bit.
You're a glutton for punishment, lass.
Yes, yeah.
Have you any idea how hard work it is digging this stuff out?
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, this is enormous. But anyway, we'll give you a go. So, have you got a saw or something? We'll take
Yeah,
all
I
right,
think
great.
the easiest thing is just to
slop off the top.
Saw off the top.
Yeah. And then we can have a look at what we've got. Go on, I don't mind.
Go on, get the spade in.
So, I mean, the big problem with this is that not only will it spread by the roots, but it sometimes seeds itself around, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. Oh, there's a seed pod here.
All right, let's have a look. And look at... Just look at that.
And that is the problem we have. The hundreds of, well, thousands of seeds. And I did read that they last for 8 years in the soil, so you've
got a problem.
A problem.
Yeah.
And also, with being in a watercourse, we've got them flowing down here into our lake and then out into the field and into a watercourse outside the garden.
And the Cairngorms are out there, aren't they?
Yes, we're right on the edge of the Cairngorms National Park. It's the last thing you want is invasive species taking over.
They'd love you for that. They really seriously would love you for that. Anyway, you have a go.
Despite the unbelievably stubborn skunk cabbage, I envy Kate her position here.
What is it that you love so much about this job?
I love a job where I'm outside all the time, and I spend my day in one of the most beautiful gardens in Scotland.
And what makes it so special to you?
I think it's probably the setting. We're right high up on a hill. When it's not misty like this, the view is phenomenal. You're looking right over Royal Deeside. You can see up into the Cairngorms. Oh. It's absolutely stunning.
And it's this atmosphere as well. You see, I think northern Scotland, I think of, mist and moisture and that weird smell. first thing in the morning.
I think it's the clean air. There's no traffic pollution at all.
That's right,
Yes,
it's that clarity
yeah.
and you can smell the vegetation. It's absolutely super. So let's squidge.
We're going to carry on with this?
Yeah, let's see what we can do. What are the challenges you face in this sort of an environment?
The main challenge we have here is the weather, to be honest. You know, we can get 4 months of snow lying, maybe start snowing end of November,
Right.
through to April sometimes.
So really the crux of the gardening year when you should be tidying
Yes,
and
yeah,
regeneration
exactly.
and getting the garden ready for the spring. You've got boulders as well, haven't you, I think?
Oh, that's a broken bit.
That's
not good.
the danger.
Yeah.
See, yeah,
Right.
you see,
Yeah, there we go. That's-
fantastic example of what we shouldn't be doing, because that would normally have and the same there. You would normally have the base plate, so where the plant grows from, and that would have lots of buds on, and
So
that's how it generates
So
again.
that's 2 half ones.
Yeah. God, it stinks. God. Do you want me to have a go from this side?
Yeah.
Just watch your fingers. You are coming out. There you are.
Ah, there's another
Hey,
bit.
now that's it. Come on. Yeah, see.
That was a struggle, but the mist is clearing and I need to wipe the muck off my hands because I'm going to meet the owner of Tillypronie, the Right Honourable Philip Astor.
Philip, what's the history of this estate?
Well, it all dates back really to the time of Queen Victoria. The house was built in 1867 by the son of Queen Victoria's physician. He was Sir James Clark, and the son, John Clark, built it. And Queen Victoria, in fact, came over and laid the foundation stone. I think it was the first time she'd ever done that, so that was rather special. And she used to come over with John Brown, who's famously her gillie and friend and counsellor, I suppose. And the story goes that the Clark family weren't comfortable with him eating in the house, and he thought that he was perhaps too superior to eat with the staff, and so they built a little hut for him outside where he would eat in solitary state.
On his own?
Well, that's what I understand.
Right.
Philip's parents bought Tillypronie in 1951 with the garden terraces already laid out. In the early days, Philip had very little interest in the garden, although he was present when the Queen planted a tree here in 1960. Years later, he took over the estate from his parents, Lord and Lady Astor.
Well, I inherited when I was very young. I was only 24. My mother was still alive then, and she was had been very much involved. And it was really ready-made. So I didn't really need to do very much, but as time went on, I saw that we've got some plans in the house of various initiatives that had been considered, for example, a rockery. And the rockery is now very magical in springtime, in particular with alpines. And then I also did a Golden Jubilee garden to mark the Queen's Jubilee, and she graciously came over and planted a doik. I had a little dog at the time, which was potentially embarrassing because as we were walking to the place where the tree was going to be planted, he did a poo in front of us and then did a wee on the tree.
Now there's a horticulturist dog, waters it in and then fertilises it. I love that.
Well, and I think she understood too.
It seems Her Majesty forgave the breach of protocol, and now Philip and his wife Justine are making their mark on the garden.
My wife's particularly keen to develop the planting in various places. So, for example, some of the beds, looking very fulsome at this time of year, can look rather bare and quiet in springtime.
So our aim is to extend the seasonality.
Exactly.
And do you know, I get the real sense that it's in very safe hands. Would you like to show me a little bit more?
Absolutely.
Tillypronie's heather beds make a fabulous feature in the front of the house, helping the garden to blend with the surrounding hills. The glorious purple colours of the Scottish heather, or ling, spread freely over 5 million acres of Scotland's hills and moorlands. It's a hardy plant which likes an acid soil, enjoying sunny slopes and lots of water, perfect for the Scottish climate. Scottish heather is an important food source for sheep and some deer when snow covers the ground in winter. Overlooked by the heather-clad hills of the Cairngorms and just down the road from Tillypronie is the village of Tarland. With countryside all around, it's hard to imagine that not everyone living here has a garden. But the community has come up with a brilliant solution. Lizzie Shepherd explains.
Tarland Community Garden came about when a group of local volunteers came together to try and encourage more people in the area to grow fruit and vegetables more successfully. We found out there were a whole series of barriers that were stopping people from growing fruit and veg locally, such as health problems. They didn't know how to grow fruit and veg, and the climate can be very challenging up here, and they didn't have the facilities to do it.
With the help of funds from the Scottish Government and Aberdeenshire Council, the group set up a 90-foot polytunnel over raised flower and vegetable beds so that everyone could have a go at being a gardener.
We've got about 40 households who are members of Tarland Community Garden, and they have an individual bed each, both inside and outside the tunnel, and the local primary school and the playgroup have beds, and so the children are able to come in and use the facilities as well.
And it's not just the youngsters who are learning new skills. Ex-fisherman and oil rigger Frank loves spending time at the garden.
I've been coming here for about a year and a half now. I've met a lot of new friends in the community garden, you know. It's been really good, like. I've always been interested in gardening, even when I was on the sea, you know. And I used to read a lot of gardening books. And I says, well, when I come ashore, I'll take up a wee bit of gardening just to pass the time, you know what I mean? I'd like to grow more sort of exotic stuff, kind of the weather's, if you get a good summer, you know? I mean, aubergines, that's the first time I've ever grown them. In this part of Scotland, if you mention aubergine, they say, "What's that? What's that?" Yeah.
And since he's discovered his green fingers, there's no stopping him.
I was actually thinking lemon cucumbers, but they're no long, you see. They're like the size of a beetroot, you know. And I reckon they've got a lovely lemony flavour, kind of apart from your normal cucumber, you know. So I'll like to try. I'll probably try them next year, I would think.
Annie's a social scientist, and she couldn't wait to get involved with the project.
I started in the garden when I first moved to Thailand, which was just over 2 years ago, and it was just starting to get built, and I was very keen to be a member because I don't have any growing space at my house. My favourite thing about coming here is probably meeting everybody that's around. It's always very sociable, and obviously the produce, because you can come up here and find something tasty for your tea, maybe do a bit of bartering with other people that are around.
As everyone settles down for some soup, made of course from homegrown produce, I'm reminded of the sense of sharing and belonging that a simple garden can encourage. The Cairngorms Mountains are known for their beauty and their wildlife and for skiing in the winter. But it's the legacy of the Ice Age that formed the rugged and breathtaking landscape that we know today, and which has defined the history of Aberdeenshire. The mountains themselves are made of granite. As the centuries passed, granite was used locally, but large-scale extraction of granite really began as commerce and industry expanded in the 18th century. As its fame spread, the demand for granite grew, forming the basis for the prosperity of the area. Jenny Brown is from Aberdeen Museum.
Well, the granite industry is a huge part of who we are here in Aberdeen. We've used our local stone, which we're very rich in, for our monuments and our homes and our buildings for centuries. And particularly from the 18th century onwards, we began to build the city out of granite. So it's really all around us. So we're here in Marshall College, which is perhaps one of the most extravagant examples of the use of granite. built when the industry was really at its peak, and the skill here it could not really be replicated today. So it's a huge part of our heritage and our culture.
There was a large number of quarries in and around Aberdeen, producing granite of different colours and textures, which led to its nickname of the Granite City.
In the 19th century, of course, the coming of steam power, things really got going. So you start seeing a lot more building within the city, using the stone, but also exporting. This is an age where we have huge engineering projects being undertaken all over the UK and in fact all over the world. And granite was perfect for that kind of building because it's strong and it's durable.
By the late Victorian period, Aberdeen workers had honed their granite working skills so much that they were able to carve fine details into the architecture of buildings and monuments.
The craftsmen here were so well respected for their skill in working what is quite a difficult stone that they were actually, as individuals, travelling overseas and to other parts of the UK to ply their trade.
The popularity of granite reached its peaks in the years leading up to the First World War, but after that, the industry began to decline.
With the discovery of oil in the North Sea, obviously things changed here a lot, and one of those was that the big companies were coming in and offering really high salaries, and the native industries couldn't really compete with that, and that really contributed to the final decline. And the industry now is much reduced, but they still very much pride themselves on those skills in working the local stone, and we also work very hard to preserve our heritage here in the city.
The beautiful architecture of Aberdeen and buildings throughout the region means granite will always be characteristic of this place. Crathes Castle itself, built of granite way back in the 16th century, shows how much the geology of the area has shaped its history. And everything I've seen in North East Scotland shows how people here have been inspired to create things from nature in harmony with the beautiful and dramatic scenery around them. It's wonderful to walk around the garden here at Crathes and think about all the members of the Burnett family and their staff who have loved it and added to it over time. Every gardener has left a bit of themselves in the design or the planting of the estate, and for some people it's been their life's work. And it was the woods in particular that head gardener's son Doug loved so much when he was a boy. Climbing trees and helping the foresters have given him a lifetime of cherished memories. I want to leave my own contribution here that will serve as a memorial to a very special gardener.
If you was to leave something that celebrated your dad's life in the garden, what would it be?
Well, I've got a photograph of him when he was retiring, with doing the garden with a hoe in his hand, standing at attention, ready to get going. I think it's something like that.
Something practical.
Would be really nice to see.
For a gardener, there is something very special about hoeing. It connects the man or the woman with the soil, and you spend a lot of time thinking, dreaming, hoeing.
I think there's a lot of dreaming.
Yeah, let's have a walk.
I'm sure I know a group of local craftsmen who can put a practical spin to this dreaming. Grampian Woodturners were established 20 years ago, and their 50 members make all kinds of wooden objects from local forests. Bill Dyack and the group hold regular demonstrations at Crathes.
I served my apprenticeship as a joiner. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do was work with timber. The members make all sorts of wooden objects, from spheres, bowls, platters, like spurtles, a Scottish stirring stick. What you make is limited by your own imagination.
Early woodturners used lathes operated by primitive mechanisms such as straps or poles, but they were very effective, and many believed they were the first form of machines. Later, a whole industry grew up around producing just the legs of chairs, and these craftsmen, known as bodgers, would often buy a piece of woodland and set up camp there. These days, motorised lathes make the process of wood turning much quicker.
I prefer wood turning to carving because I can achieve a finished object fairly quickly on wood turning. And carving is quite a slow and laborious process, and I don't have patience for it. And you can take off quite heavy. Not too bad. It could have been better.
Today, the gardeners at Crathes have donated some oak to Grampian wood turners so they can make a very special one-off piece.
This is a piece of the oak that we were given by the gardener for making the handle for the hoe.
Fellow wood turner Alistair Mackenzie inspects the finished article.
He's done a very good job, yes. He's a very talented turner as Bill. So, yes, it's just neat to get the plaque mounted on here, and that'll be it ready for mounting.
Head gardener Douglas Macdonald was such a fixture here at Crathes, it seems only right to commemorate him. So I've gathered together National Trust for Scotland staff, gardeners and wood turners to help me celebrate a place that has brought joy and inspiration to thousands of visitors, but also great happiness to families with a deeply personal connection. Sir James and Lady Sybil were the last in a long family line who poured their hearts into this beautiful garden and who have handed it over to the Trust, knowing it would be loved and cared for generations to come.
Doug, your father was here for 44 years and he passed that challenge on to other gardeners, and Toby's now here to maintain that challenge. And in celebrating that, I thought it would be really nice to just leave a little something that connects gardeners with the land. And I'm hoping that this may speak to you in a very special way.
While his dad's legacy lives on, for Doug, it's his memories of playing in the garden and parkland as a boy that mean everything in the world to him.
It's heaven. It feels like home every time I come back here, especially when I come up here. You just started, you bottle up, you fill up. It's great. It's memories, memories, memories. Fantastic. I wish I could live it all over again. I do.
What a wonderful reminder of the powerful impact a garden can have on people's lives, as I've been lucky enough to see at all the fabulous places I've visited today. Now, that's got to be worth a toast.
The Scottish Gardens.
Scottish Gardens.